All right, good to go. So still plenty of things in flight since last time, but I'm just going to go leave the team, give any updates, whatever you folks do is relevant. While waiting, Pavel and Aaron are working on getting us away from Bosch and into WebSockets. There are some challenges with that were unexpected, but we're working through them. We believe that as a result, we should get better behavior with conditions with shaky connections and poor networking conditions. Anyone else wants to add anything?
Yeah, we're finally on to ProCity 0.11 in Meet Jitsi. That was a fairly recent release. We've been on a fairly older nightly. We had to vet this, but it's been in Docker for quite some time. Otherwise, we also have a newer release of Jibri from a couple weeks ago that I think we neglected to mention. No real deal there, except we are not shutting down the Jibri as often when we get a bad stream key. Thanks to Brian on that one. I think that's it for me.
On the bridge, we've got two big parallel efforts going on. There's work into big conferences, which we define as 100 participants, though not 100 senders. I think we're looking at 20 senders. And then we've also been really trying to do a final push here. We finally kind of said, okay, we'll do a kind of a feature freeze on New Bridge, and we've been doing a lot of work on focusing, looking at the logs and stuff on Meet Jitsi, finding any outstanding bugs, and we found some really good ones. We've got a couple more. We're kind of narrowing down the list. We're hope to deem New Bridge stable by the end of the month or not long after. So that's the goal right now. There's the update there.
On mobile land, sorry I've missed a few of these. Last week we pushed the new SDK release, which has some important changes on Android.
So you're not coming in very clearly.
So we may need to try that again.
Am I being heard?
Now you are again. Welcome back.
Oh, where did you lose me? Something happened with my connection.
You said SDK release, and then we were done.
Oh, all right. So that was all of it. So yeah, last week we made a new SDK release. This release focuses mostly on Android stuff. More importantly, we're switching the JavaScript engine from JavaScript core to Hermes. This is the direction that React Native is taken, and we're hoping it gets us rid of some nasty bugs we could never repro. And so far, so good. So fingers crossed. And in addition, we also made a change. It was mostly an oversight from back in the day when we switched to the software codecs to enable simulcast on Android and also get rid of some crashes on crappy chipsets. We did not use the hardware decoder, and we are going to switch back to that now. So software encoder, hardware decoder. And if all goes well, testing this week, we're hoping to probably release a Jitsi Meet version also to the stores sometime late this week or the next, otherwise. And I think that's all I have.
All right, thank you, everyone. Any questions from the floor?
Hi, I actually did have a couple of questions regarding some of the versions that you have released currently. So we're working with the version that's tagged 2.1.
All right. What is the question?
Sorry, can you hear me? Okay.
Now we can, yes.
Yeah, loud and clear.
It says that I'm muted.
Still not hearing you.
No?
Now we can.
Well, now we are again.
Okay. Sorry about that. So yeah, we're currently we're testing the version that's tagged 2.1, and we noticed that there was some stuff going on there with REMB support, and I wanted to figure out what your current plans were with that and how you were going forward with support for that with future versions.
We did not have REMB support for a while in New Bridge. That was one of the few kind of regressions, and we added it recently. So now it's on par with the old 1.0 versions. And there are, as far as I know, there are no plans to get rid of REMB support or anything like that. We were just a bit slow on bringing it back because the primary stuff is still Chrome, and that does the transport CC stuff. So we didn't do it as early as we did the TCC stuff.
Okay, so that's coming in, it's there to stay. And so what about plans for TCC, like server-side congestion control?
The send side, the TCC is the send side stuff, and yeah, that's been in and it isn't going anywhere as far as I know. That's what Google and Chrome are using. So I think generally we're going to follow what the browsers, and I mean primarily Chrome use, so that may evolve over time, but I don't see TCC going anywhere anytime too soon.
Okay. I did also have one more question regarding DTLS support. Is there any chance that that's going to be supported for the old JVB, or what are the plans with that?
No.
We don't have any plans that, if I'm assuming you mean DTLS 1.2, and we don't have any plans to do that in Old Bridge.
Okay.
So that's another thing we're definitely working against, is we want to make, we're trying very hard, obviously, because it affects us too, to make sure that New Bridge is stable by the time DTLS 1.0 is fully deprecated.
Gotcha.
Which got delayed a little bit on Chrome side. It was going to be next month, and now I think it's going to be a little later. But we're very much keeping an eye on that.
Oh, I hadn't heard of a pushback from Chrome, so that's actually good news, because I thought it was still next month, and we were thinking, it's coming up, so time was kind of hit,
Well, it's kind of the latest date that they gave was for the current Canary, which I do think is, if not end of March, early April.
Okay.
So that's still the date that we are kind of working with. So all of that is already working on the new bridge in here in me, Jitsi. And if push comes to shove, you're better off migrating to new bridge anyway, right? Because whatever deficiencies it has, it's still better than DTLS failing.
Right.
Now, if you look at Canary, DTLS 1.0 is still enabled there. So I don't know if that means anything, or whether they just turn it off at some point.
Yeah, they literally on the bug, they forgot to go in and remove it, and they missed the 81. It was originally going to be an M81, and they missed that. So now I think the plan is 82. There's a few things on the discuss.
That's what I'm saying. 82 is still enabled.
Oh,
for DTLS 2.0.
It still hasn't hit master yet, but I think they're debating over to which way to do the experiment. But yeah, I think it's coming into master. But yeah,
so plans are to disable it as of 82.
I think that's the latest update. Yeah.
Got it. Okay. Okay, yeah, I think those are the only questions I had. Thank you.
Thanks for asking.
I've got a couple questions, particularly about, I think it was Jonathan a few weeks ago had mentioned that there was a bug, and my understanding of it was that it was causing issues with the quality of streaming. That is, when you have multiple people on the call, you would intermittently have somebody whose quality would go down. And you had described something where my understanding was something you were iterating over an array. I don't know exactly what you had described that the cause of the problem was, but I'm trying to remind you of what you were talking about. But we've been running into issues where we're randomly having basically lip sync issues. And it seems like the video quality drops at the same time, but it seems like maybe that's not related, that it has something to do with the bug that you described. And I'm wondering if I'm talking about the right thing. I have another question unrelated to this, but I'm wondering if that's been resolved or when it's expected to be resolved.
It's not ringing a bell for me. We did fix some things related to lip sync, but not that would also cause quality. In our cleaning up of bugs, I think in the server we found a few places where there were like things that were going into excessively long loops that we've also cleaned up. So it's possible that, I don't remember precisely that symptom that you described, but certainly there are some cases that we cleaned up that could have caused some potentially similar issues. So
Okay.
I guess just keep an eye on master as we check things in, and let us know.
What we've been seeing is, like, when we were on a call of about 6 to 7 people, which we used for like a weekly call in our context, just in our own internal use, but also as a test. What we're seeing is that basically one person will see that another person on the call has lip sync issues and everybody else sees them just fine. And that'll happen kind of randomly to any one person on the call. Like I will see one other person out of sync, but everybody else will be fine, and they will see me out of sync in some cases, and I'll be fine for some people. And this is like, it doesn't stay on one person. You know, it might go for a few minutes with one person, and then it kind of stops and they return to totally normal, and then it kind of chooses another person to attack.
I mean, there are various like weird network conditions that could cause that, but I guess that shouldn't be happening on that regular basis.
Yeah.
Of course, ultimately the lip sync, the thing that actually does the lip sync ultimately was of course in the browser, so we don't have complete control over it. But it's certainly possible we're sending bad information or queues are getting backed up. I've seen cases where, and this needs more investigation, where there's like larger delays than we would expect in the queues. I don't know if this is, Java garbage collection hitting us badly, or we're doing something like a bad loop somewhere, but we're going to investigate that some more.
I think we may have sort of solved it, at least, and I don't know if this is a band-aid or if it's an actual fix. We increased resources on the server, and also considered increasing the heap size, but I don't know if you have any recommendations about minimum resources. That's actually what I wanted to ask you about, in addition to a totally unrelated thing. But I haven't found anywhere where you guys have posted a recommended level of resources for X number of users. If you have any kind of idea, stress test wise, the number of individuals that could be on a call with both video and audio, and the server side resources.
I think what we've observed is that the amount of load that a server can handle is strictly proportional to the bit rate. So an Amazon C4 X large can usually handle 200 to 300 megabits.
C5.
C5, okay. C5 X large, is that right?
Yeah.
So we use those, and they handle about 200 to 300 megabits per second. How this translates to number of users, it's hard to say because of conference size, browser type. Like Firefox doesn't support simulcast, so the number of Firefox users affects it, and so on. But the way we we estimate machines, and the way we actually auto scale up when they're loaded is all based on bitrate.
Is what? I'm sorry?
Is based on bitrate and system load.
Do you have any idea in your own use though, like simultaneous number of users at say 720p? I mean, obviously there's huge factors in there, like how far away they are from the server and their own network connection and all that stuff. I understand, but we're just trying to get an idea of where we need to scale.
For me, Jitsi, I think, let me look, but I think it's on the order of a couple of hundred users per machine.
Okay, yeah, that's kind of what we were figuring.
The biggest factor here is the number of peer-to-peer calls, though, because they're still counted.
Yeah, and we've experimented with turning peer-to-peer on and off to try to kind of see exactly where that, where the sweet spot is at. But the only other question that I had was, we have, I have been doing some development in terms of client-side recording, and I've already solved that problem. So we're not actually using your recording solution because we're not putting it through the server at all. We're using a WebRTC-based solution that allows us to capture all of the streams on the client side, and basically add a button within our Jitsi instance that's just rendered on the client side that allows us to capture that full call. But when testing it in Safari, one of the things that I was trying was using the dev tools and kind of experimenting to see if we could get any kind of direct Safari support. And it looks like when we're in the dev tools and we enable, or that is we mock Chrome by changing the user agent, everything works just fine with Jitsi, but it looks like you guys are doing browser detection that is automatically sending us over to a page when the user agent is detected as Safari, saying it's not a supported browser. And I'm wondering if you have any plans to use something like Adapter.js in order to support that, because it would allow Safari to use basically Chrome like WebRTC. That and for other browsers too, I guess the same would probably apply to like old Edge and maybe even IE if we're really unlucky.
So, Chris, we do use Adapter, and the reason we don't support Safari right now is, as of Safari 12.1, they've switched to Unified Plan, and we are currently working on adding support for Unified Plan. So that is the reason why. Sorry.
I'm sorry, I'm not familiar with Unified Plan.
So that is the we have something called Plan B, and that is how the browser. Chrome currently uses Plan B, and this is the way of it's like how the SDPs are exchanged and how many lines
of WebRTC, kind of their spec.
It's the main reason why we don't work on Safari. So we're working essentially on that.
I guess on that note, does that mean that we're going to have to significantly overhaul something when you roll to Unified, or is that?
Well, that depends on how much you are running a custom version now.
Right.
But it will be a very significantly overhauled version of libjitsi.
Okay, so basically you're holding off Safari support until that's rolled out.
That is Safari support.
Okay. Okay, that was all I had. Thank you.
Just to address your question about memory, we haven't tried increasing the heap size because we don't really need to. The process usually uses probably a few hundred megabytes of memory. Increasing the default is I think 4 or 3 gigabytes of heap. Increasing this further might lead to longer pauses, so I wouldn't recommend it. And if you do, make sure you test it well.
Are you guys still using the same GC settings that you were using in the old bridge, or has that changed in the new bridge?
We changed that, I think, early summer. The old bridge uses Java 8's default of parallel GC, which we found that it causes longer pauses, and we changed it to CMS. So the new bridge uses CMS right now, at least on Java 8. I think we need more testing there because newer versions of Java come with G1 by default.
Yeah.
Which our tests showed that it was not performing as well as CMS. However, our tests were limited, so I think it's an area worth exploring more.
And in terms of CPU and heap with the new bridge, do you have any recommendations of what range would be recommended?
Well, the heap defaults to either 3 or 4 gigabytes, and that's what we've been using forever. We don't see any reason to change. As far as CPU, well, you just get different max load that it can handle depending on the different machines. We use Amazon C5 X large instances here on Meet.
Yes, it's helpful.
So in production, you're running on C5X large?
Correct.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any sort of the C5's X larges? I wonder if there's any sort of, if there's ever been any testing in terms of like the different bandwidth or I/O kind of dedicated IOP settings in AWS. Since it sounds like a lot of the constraint tends to be bandwidth related. I'm just curious if anybody's done any testing on, with like much higher throughput. Although I wouldn't expect that to really change that much, I guess, but just curious.
Yeah, right now we're hitting the CPU threshold much earlier, so we haven't.
Yeah, because you get a 10 gigabit link according to Amazon for C5X large with the enhanced network.
Okay, cool. That is helpful.
And we are not hitting that 10 gigabit link on each instance for sure.
Okay, not even close, I guess.
Exactly.
Okay, it's good to know. I have this is Paul. I've got a couple questions. So what? So in Jacofo, I believe, where like in a lot of places, it seems that there's been a switch over from the XMPP component to sort of an XMPP connection. What is that? But I think Jacofo is still using a component. Like, what is the difference in terms, or what, or the rationale behind using a component? Is there sort of, is my understanding correct that a component can do more?
Well, component is a discoverable thing, and the reason we were using a component, the reasons we were using a component were mainly historical. Back in the days of XMPP clients that were not WebRTC, in a world where you would use the same client to connect to different services, discoverability was a very important feature. You wanted things to happen automatically. You wanted your XMPP client to discover bridges without any special configuration. So that's why originally things were architected with the component. I think there are some other advantages that you can do fine-grained configuration on what sort of stuff is allowed and what isn't. And then we just ran with that for a long while because that's how it was. However, it imposes constraints on configuration.
Right.
It's just more hassle to manage, which is why we've slowly been moving away from components.
Is I guess the big hassle that you have to directly configure those components in prosody config? Is that
Yeah, especially for the bridges, we moved away from components specifically because it's much easier to do the sorts of service discovery that was happening with these components anyway, using kind of mucks and sort of what we've called the breweries.
Right.
And for Jacofo, it wouldn't be necessary to have a component. The admin rights would would be sufficient, but it's sort of a historical artifact. Is that correct?
I think that's a reasonable guess. I mean, someone would have to change it, and then we'd see what happens. I believe the main thing about it is, depending on how Jitsi Meet client is configured, it needs to know what focus to be talking to. And right now, it talks to that focus directly as a component, not as a user. So there might need to be some Jitsi Meet client changes as well if we're moving the Jacofo component away from being that and more into just another connection.
But theoretically, it should, aside from those changes, it should be the same, I guess, right? It would just have to be a user. It would be user of the JIT as opposed to like just a component. Does that sound
right? And then advertised as such in config.js probably as well.
Right.
Okay, that makes sense. But mostly it just uses the admin rights, I guess.
Yeah,
that's my understanding, but Damien may also have some, or Pavel may have some nuance there too.
Yeah, it's the client sends directly message to the component address of Jitsi and doesn't enter the muck till Jitsi says so. Some of the authentication works like that. So, and the first participant to come is a moderator also works because of this mechanism. So it won't work like that, just entering the muck. So for some features, we depend on that Jitsi is the first one that enters the room and can check stuff. So
yeah, that doesn't have to change though. If we move Jitsi's that part of the code to a user connection. And looking at config.js, we're currently just hard coding the component address there. So
we could have a JIT instead potentially. Yeah, I think that was how the Docker Compose was working for a while with the focus JIT instead.
Oh, was it?
I think that's how at least the default config was set up. I've been mucking about so much with that one recently that I don't know what the stock config.js was, because I've been working to turn that into a real template anyway. It's not quite ready, but that was one of my side projects recently, so I don't have a spare copy in front of me. But if I recall, it was specifying focus JIT in the config.js instead of just focus. So that may actually be potentially usable anyway.
Okay, it's good to know. I've got one more question related to. So I know you guys are doing on the spot, Jitsi Spot Zoom integration. Is there a way, or have you guys is that integrated right now just as the capability of being able to show Zoom on the spot, or has there ever been any development effort to try doing an integration between Jitsi and Zoom? Like I was wondering if maybe something similar to what's happening on Spot, but via Jibri or something, where you can kind of intercept the stream and kind of just it might be, you might have a bunch of limitations, but
so what would be the point of that?
Just to be able to join allow people to use Jitsi, but talk to a Zoom, external Zoom call.
But why is that better than the current approach?
Well, in our case, we have like specific use cases, custom features that we'd rather than.
Oh, I see.
That only exist in Jitsi land.
But so what you want to do is essentially bot-like participants to Zoom. Why would you want to leverage Jitsi here at all?
So, what do you mean exactly? Like, why not just use Zoom? You're saying?
I mean, you have you have the Zoom ecosystem, and you want to add your server-side functionality so that you would be able to add whatever added value you have on top of that.
Mm-hmm.
So it sounds like, okay, so you want like a bot-like participant to join the Zoom call, and you want to capture audio coming out of that.
Mm-hmm.
And what I'm saying is, I don't see why dealing with Jitsi in this case helps you at all. Why wouldn't you just, okay, I'm having like a Jibri-like thing, but that has nothing to do with Jitsi. It's just running a Zoom client, and then I capture the audio input and output of that. Where do you hope Jitsi would help you in this entire equation? Because to me, it sounds like just, okay, adding layers of complexity that don't actually bring you any value.
Just to allow, well, if there are certain features that they can't access in Zoom, but maybe we can't control if it's like an external, somebody has an external client, external meeting that's happening in Zoom, and there are some users that are just, they're going to use Zoom, but maybe there's an internal team that uses Jitsi. Just being, providing a way to be able to provide or integrate the custom Jitsi features that we've developed, but without losing access to these external, basically like an external integration with Zoom to be able to kind of bridge some of those calls. Like I guess maybe think of it very similar to like a Jigasi, like a SIP integration, except applied to Zoom is the way I would look at it.
Right, but in the case of the SIP integration, we're adding value by essentially being the conference host, right? And then it's just a connector to a specific user. In the Zoom integration, you're talking about having two conference hosts, Zoom and Jitsi, which starts sounding quite complicated, and for not just from an engineering perspective, but also from a user experience perspective. So I don't know. I'm just, okay, maybe the philosophical part of it is not so relevant. I guess, no, we don't currently have any plans. For us, the purely client-side integration from rooms is enough to achieve our goals. So we don't intend to do any server-side bridge-to-bridge communication with Zoom.
Okay, just curious.
Because it's Jibri is very expensive, right? So it's not only complexity, it's also the fact that you have to run these gateways, and you lose quality in the process. You incur latency. It's just.
Yeah, I'm not saying it's ideal, but there are certain scenarios that we've sort of run into where there's client demand they want to be able to support Zoom, but not limit some of the functionality that we're sort of adding to the mix. And so it's sometimes some of these bigger conference providers, it's not always possible to convince people to use something different, right? And so if we bridge the gap, that could be a way around it. And so I was thinking it maybe is a little bit closer to like the hack side of the spectrum, but the using Jibri is just one way, because it sounds similar to what is happening on the Spot side. You just open the Zoom client, you can do the whole auth mix, but then in Jibri land, you could also just intercept those streams, and that's sort of the main thing we would want. We would get access to some of those audio and video streams, and also obviously send the Jitsi streams. But yes, I agree, it's expensive from a overhead standpoint.
Hello, for the unified plan support, I'm wondering what are the changes in Jitsi components? Are the changes in SDK and Jigofo or JRB?
Jay, do you want to talk about that? I think not much, but Jay would be able to answer more accurately.
Yeah, the change mostly would be in the Jitsi meet, mostly on the client side. I don't think we would need any changes on Jigofo.
Thanks. That's good news.
Jay, actually, now that you're saying this, I'm thinking, what about simulcast support in Safari? Wouldn't we need RID support or MID or something?
No, no. Like for Safari, we can still do SDP munging.
I'm sorry if you already said this before, but when are those changes rolling?
We are working on it right now, so hopefully in the next month or so.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Sounds like we're going quiet. So thank you everyone for joining this week's edition of the call, and looking forward to meeting you again in 2 weeks. Bye-bye.
Bye.